So welcome to Neurodiversity in the Workplace. As I said, my name's Gurpreet. We've got Catherine McCann joining us as well from Ethical Reading, and she'll be my co-host. On the panel, we've got Becky Winnerer. We have Jess Rees. Becky is from Count Me In Collective. Jess Rees from AutAngel. We have Sarah Batt from NatWest, and we have Stuart Munton from A&D Digital. So quite a powerful panel, I'm sure you'll agree. So what is Ethical Reading? For the veterans out there, you will know about us, but for the newbies, we were launched in 2018. We're a not-for-profit social enterprise. Our mission in life is to help embed ethics into the way businesses work and to make Reading a better place. As a result, we want to inspire organisations and individuals. We want to provide some resources and help educate, and also work with other organisations and individuals through collaboration. And working together, we can achieve a lot more in terms of impact. In due course, we do hope what we're doing here will grow into what we term an ethical cities movement or network as we go forward with other organisations. And actually, we have a representative here from Wokingham, Graham, you might want to chat to at some point, whose organisation, Wokingham Positive Difference, does very similar things based in Wokingham. So very simple agenda. These are the introductions. We're going to have a panel discussion between sort of 7:30. So I'll ask panellists to share their broad experiences of work. And then we'll just open up from the Q&A from the audience. And if you feel comfortable actually asking questions through the chat window rather than raising your hand or through Zoom, that's absolutely fine. Do put your questions as people are talking into that chat window. And we've got a couple of people, Brad and Graham, who are looking at the chat window, and they'll raise those questions with the speaker. So if you want to put the question to a specific speaker, then just put that on. I'm going to hand over to Becky in first instance of Count Me In Collective. And really, Becky, if you could sort of say a few words about your sort of personal, experiences and what you found in this space working with neurodiverse people and some of the challenges and issues they face, that would be fantastic. If you kick the session off.
First of all, I just want to say thank you very much to Ethical Reading for hosting this event and putting it on. It's something that needs to be talked about a lot. It's something that I'm obviously very passionate about. So first things first, I'll just chat through what Count Me In Collective is. It's a group of people who are working together to set up a training brewery for people with all disabilities, actually. So it's not just about neurodivergence. It's also about really the most within the disability movement, within the disability community, some of the most marginalised people. So we also focus quite a lot on learning disabilities, which is very underrepresented in the workplace. Just a few stats. I don't want to focus on them too much. I'd much rather focus on the individuals and what is possible. But so a few stats. The recent Buckland report, which came out earlier this year, showed that about 3 in 10 autistic people are employed, so 30%, which is slightly up. I think previously it'd be more like 25, something like that. But that's obviously pretty dire. Then if you look at learning disabilities, that plummets to just below 5%. And I am a parent carer. I have, my eldest is autistic, and then my youngest has very complex needs, also including autism, but lots of other disabilities. And this did catapult me into a amazing world of disability that I didn't understand. And I started to learn. That's what you do. I am also a qualified lecturer. I am also an artist. Qualified. But more importantly, read the Count Me In Collective, I am an experienced brewer. So what I decided the last few years was that I've got this very strong sense that if you can do something, like you genuinely can do it, as in you've got the time, you've got the space, you've got the energy, you've got the ideas, you've got the drive. If you can do something, then you should do something. So I started to really look for how I could create this idea of a training brewery. So I guess, what do I mean by a training brewery? So having done brewing since 2008, so quite experienced, I understood that the process can be broken down into quite I think partially because I was trained as a lecturer as well, so I understand how to break things down. It can be broken down into a very wide range of skill sets, so that it covers a huge range of people who perhaps wouldn't be able to find training or experience or work. There are jobs in there for pretty much everybody. And so I started kind of working on it. I got an incredible team together, and then we found a terrific venue, which is the Castle Tap on Castle Street in Reading, where they happen to have a room that we can fit. It's dinky, but we can fit a brewery in there. Catherine's seen it.
It's quite dinky.
It's dinky. That is true. It's dinky. And so what we've been doing for the last couple of years is we've been crowdfunding. We've organised events where we've raised money. But also what we've done is we've reached out to other breweries and pubs in the area, because it takes time to set something like that up. There's a lot of bureaucracy. There's a lot of hoops to jump through, but we didn't want that to stop us. So what we've done in the intervening time, because I've already had quite a lot of people wanting to be trainees, and I didn't want to let them down. So I reached out through my contacts in the brewery trade to organise collaborations with other local breweries, and as a result, we organised collaboration brews between CMIC, Cadmium Collective, I call it CMIC, and these breweries. And as a result, the beers that we've already made with these breweries, where our trainees came along and learnt about brewing, have already been poured at the Great British Beer Festival. They've been poured at one of the most prestigious beer events up in Leeds. And we're trying to build a network of breweries, and by doing that, we introduce breweries to working with people who are autistic, have learning disabilities. We've got a wheelchair user. We've got people with anxiety. We've got people with ADHD. So it's not just about us training the trainees. It's just as much about the trainees teaching us. And particularly, say, Elusive Brewing, who are based out, they're just sort of Wokingham way. They said it was, in fact, Andy, who is the sort of CEO of Elusive, said it was the most fulfilling thing he'd ever done in many, many years of brewing, because what it does is it makes you think differently. It makes you look at things in a different way. So it's not really about some kind of patronising training program for poor things. It's absolutely not. It's a collective, and it's about a group effort where all of us can recognise the fact that disabled people are not othered. They are all of us. They are everything. And actually, that it's a sort of nonsense in some ways, with all due respect to this. It's a sort of nonsense that it even has to happen, because there have always been disabled people in our society. So why is it there's a sort of us and them? So my big goal, obviously there's a brewery and it will be there. And then we also want to add in hospitality training through the pub. But it's more than that. It's about everybody working together and gaining training and experience. And also, most importantly, the end goal is jobs. But it's also about how there's a huge positive feedback loop, that it works actually for everybody involved in it. So at the moment we've stalled a little bit because Reading Council, but they are dragging their heels with our planning application, which means we've got a bit stuck, but we are still trying to do events and do collaborations. So we will keep going until that piece of paperwork is in place. We've got everybody, the brewery is ordered, it's all funded, tradespeople are ready, we've got the trainees ready to go, everything's ready to go. We're just being held up by a department at the council, unfortunately. So yeah, and just in case it isn't clear, when I say brewing, I mean beer. We would make beer on a very small scale at the Room in the Castle Tap, and that beer would then be on sale throughout Reading through various pubs who have already agreed to take the beer, plus the Castle Tap itself. And the people who work with us would have a wide range of disabilities and neurodivergence. And as a final thing, because I've probably witted too much, a final point is probably the most important thing about what we do, and the core of everything is reasonable adjustments, because we live or die on reasonable adjustments. If we don't get those right, then our trainees have failed. And one of the things that I would really like to express more than anything else in this is reasonable adjustments are not hard. They're just being decent and kind to each other. So shall I wrap up there?
Brilliant. That sounds like a fantastic initiative, Becky. Wish you every success. Actually, that's fantastic, and I'll be in touch afterwards. Actually, too. I'd love for you to come along to the community forum later on that we have. Let's move to Stuart. So Stuart, you are dyslexic. You work at A&D Digital.
Yep.
You're a computer maestro. Can you explain, your background a little bit, how you came, how you realized you were dyslexic and got into IT, and you're in now quite a senior position as well.
Yeah. So, how did I work out? So, it was a kind of back in the day when I was early at school, and I realized that actually I knew the answer but couldn't write the letters, and I knew there was something wrong with it, and I just couldn't work it out. And this was when I was about 7, 8, and I've always been fairly bright, but again, just making the letters make sense didn't work. And so luckily I found computing because I needed to use spell checkers. And I needed to use those. And so therefore my life then changed from that point onwards. So therefore, early BBC computers, then into early PCs, then into early everything else with that. And so my career then went through a very computerized kind of life. And so that was the kind of the early journey. And that was kind of how I sort of installed reasonable adjustments for myself for my dyslexia. And so I've taken that with me all the way through what I do. So I'm now the group CIO for a technical consultancy, because actually being able to actually make the letters make sense doesn't really require much of that anymore, because there's squiggly lines and there's AI to generate a lot of that stuff. So a lot of that stuff goes away, and then actually that's a much easier kind of place to be. Interestingly, from a technology firm point of view, so A&D Digital has about 1,400 people across the country. Most of the people in the organisation have from a kind of technical background, so they're kind of developers, engineers, most people, and so we write software. Most of the core product we produce is software, but we also do consulting, transformation services, that sort of thing. And it's interesting when you look in our market, in our the kind of people who work in technology, and you look at the kind of high number of neurodiverse individuals, because of kind of some of the same reasons. I mean, like I got into kind of sort of computers and coding through being dyslexic, but actually other people who are ASD, ADHD have got other reasons why they may have actually engaged with technology. Some things are to do with adjustments of color of screens. Yeah. Some things to do with actually how you can go into a kind of hyper focused position. And so some of these things actually help with what we do as a business. And so therefore, so technology probably over indexes in a neurodiverse kind of position compared to kind of normal other office jobs. And so therefore we take it seriously as an organization. So I'm in our exec group, and I'm the exec sponsor for what we class as our distinguishing differences group. And distinguishing differences to us contains neurodiversity, it contains physical differences, and it contains invisible differences. But for the sake of this conversation, I'm going to kind of stick to the neurodiversity side. And so if you take the 1,400 people within and digital, there are 112 who have openly provided identification of their neurodiversity, and those are the people who openly provide that, yeah. And that's the kind of data that we end up being able to kind of look at, because there's lots of people who don't, yeah. And so therefore, when we were discussing the kind of this session, like what are the challenges? Well, some of the challenges are the stigma attached to having a X. And it doesn't matter what the X is, but again, like if I'm in a marginalized group of any kind that is potentially not immediately visible, it will be a marginalized group, and it kind of so we run monthly community groups with kind of our neurodiverse groups. We kind of have people come and talk about kind of how it feels to be on the SD spectrum, so how it feels to deal with hyperfocus, how it is to work with other software engineers who may not understand, and also other software engineers who have different neurodiversities, because actually if 10-15% of our digital is neurodiverse, it's likely you're going to be working with some people who are as well, and therefore what is that kind of intersectional kind of position between those. And so we run kind of communities in our Slack channels. So we use Slack for everyone to communicate with each other and join together. So therefore you can either identify or you can be an ally in that group. But we also then run kind of monthly sessions where everyone kind of comes together and talks about stuff. Sometimes they tie in with kind of awareness and celebration weeks, like so there was the neurodiversity celebration week. We kind of all came together and people kind of gave talks on each of the days about kind of how it feels to experience a different neurodiversity. Other challenges we have are about kind of data and reporting, because we want to make sure that we are looking at our organisations have to kind of do gender pay gaps, but we also look up internally on our neurodiversity pay gap. So what are we looking at for the community, and how do things make a difference? Because commercial differences are fundamentally important, and the gender pay gap is a kind of legal requirement, but the neurodiversity one is really interesting to us, so we kind of run that internally. And then the final kind of bit, which I mentioned, is like what we do about adjustments. And those adjustments start before you work for the company. So if you identify in a certain way, you may ask for the questions for an interview, but ahead of time. Yeah. So there are kind of things to do in terms of interviews. There are things to do in terms of onboarding. There are things to do in terms of buddying people up. And we do kind of buddying processes. You can find a neurodiverse mentor. Yeah. So a senior person in the organization who is neurodiverse will happily mentor someone who isn't, because actually they know what struggles they're going to go through, and everyone's neurodiversities are different. We kind of understand that, but at least you've gone through some of those struggles, and so therefore we found that a really effective way of kind of helping the junior people from the organisation accept and own their neurodiversity, and how they kind of develop with it. So as I said, so there's a lot of interesting stuff, and I just like talking to people about this, learning from other people, seeing what other people do. So I'm really thankful to being here to talk about this from my side, but also kind of learn from everyone else. So
brilliant. And thank you, Stuart. I mean, I remember many years ago, I worked in the IT industry as well for many, many years. And when I started off working, I worked for a company called Texas Instruments. And there was a software engineer who was already there when I joined. And he had, and there was accommodation at that time for him, in the sense that, he was clearly very, very talented, and he was like an order of magnitude, I would say, more productive, and creative than the other software engineers. But he would come into work at sort of 4 o'clock and then work through the night and then go home at sort of 6 a.m. And that was his work pattern, and the employer just accepted it because, he was exceptional. And I think in those days we didn't have a lot of the terminology and the understanding that we have now. But I think Jamie put it in the chat window. We'll talk to Jamie later on, Jamie Gordon, that actually a lot of these things don't cost anything. A lot of the accommodations don't cost much at all. Sort of adjusting for hours of work and things like that. It's very, very minimal, if any cost at all. So, I think, there's definitely, a whole sort of sphere of talent that isn't being tapped as a result. Brilliant.
Especially
Let's move on to Sarah. Sarah, do you want to explain a little bit? So Sarah is from, NatWest. And do you want to explain your background and how you were diagnosed with your condition and what you do inside NatWest to promote neurodiversity and so on?
Yeah, of course. It's been my pleasure. Hello. I'm Sarah Batt. As Gerrit said, I work at NatWest. I've been there for 20 years, which you're going to find difficult to believe based on my youthful complexion. Obviously, they employed me as a child. I'm autistic and I have ADHD, and I'm very proud to be co-chair of our Enable network, which is our colleague-focused network looking at disability and neurodivergence. I discovered my autism and my ADHD about 5 years ago, but the clues have always been there. They're some more subtle than others. And it was actually a mate of mine, who'd gone through a diagnostic process themselves recently. He said, well, if I've got it, ADHD, that's it. She goes, you definitely have. I wasn't very flattered at the time. I thought, cheek. But I had started by coincidence, and this is all pre-COVID, I had started working from home on a permanent basis. And that was because it suited the organisation that I worked for at the time. Desk space was in a premium in the office location where I worked, so it was a favour to them. And as a trusted member of staff, I started working from home, doing my job remotely. And I noticed a massive difference. At the end of the day, I had more energy, had more focus during the meetings I was attending. I was able to switch from task to task a lot more easily than I'd ever experienced previously. And I've got 4 kids and I just returned from maternity leave. So I wasn't expecting to have an abundance of energy at the end of the day. I had no right to that. So, it did make me curious. And in truth, I had some real misconceptions about neurodivergence, especially autism and ADHD. I thought autism was all about Rayman, and I thought ADHD was about hyperactive 6-year-old. And sadly, I am neither of those things. So I got curious to find out what autism is really about and what ADHD is really about. And it was that led me to seeking out a diagnosis. Yeah. And then there was a moment of sadness, I think, where you realise how different life could have been if you'd have known that about yourself a little bit earlier on. And as Becky alluded, well, Becky was brilliant in outlining the stats. Some of these stats are the ones that make me so passionate and vocal about neurodivergence and accessibility more broadly. So the conversation around neuro-inclusion is very similar, if not the same as accessibility for folk with all kinds of disabilities, conditions and impairments. But when I found out that 1 in 5 autistic adults have any kind of employment at all, whether it's paid or otherwise, I was deeply saddened, and I didn't find myself feeling like the 1 in 5 who'd cracked it. In fact, far from it. I was looking back going, I'm the 1 in 5 who's got by the skin of my teeth, and I don't have any answers here. I know that there are plenty of occasions when I could have been amongst the 4 in 5 on the flip side of those stats. So that's, I suppose, really what drives me to talk about it a lot more than I ever thought I would. The first conversation that I had with my line manager about it, I was bricking it. And the reason I was so nervous was because I didn't understand a great deal about it myself, because I feared that I would have a response that was, well, why are you mentioning this now? You've been with us for many years. How come it's suddenly relevant? And what I realised was that some of the homegrown coping mechanisms that I had built were not helping me cope as well as I was pretending that they were. And I was kind of hoping that someone had a silver bullet out there to help me, and that there were better, more learned answers than the ones that I'd stumbled upon by accident. And it's been a wonderful experience since. Stuart spoke about some colleague connections that he has within his organisation, and I was fortunate enough to find that myself. We had a wonderful group of autistic colleagues who had decided to get together on the regular off their own initiative, and through linking with them I was able to understand what autism meant for them, and the barriers that they experienced in the workplace. I could strongly relate to some of those. And in doing so, I was able to kind of shortcut, in some cases, the process of finding adjustments that worked for me in the workplace. It wasn't, and it still isn't the case that an adjustment that works for another autistic individual works for me, but it does help with that process of trial and error and does help that sense of community, and having somebody else that gets it makes a massive difference. So that's one of the things that I think I'm most proud of within the Enable network, is building that sense of community. And an example that I often share to sort of bring to life neurodivergence and adjustments is last year I was outside of work. I was involved in an employment tribunal. I'm a governor at a local school. That's not an environment I've ever been in before. It had been a really protracted process going on for a couple of years. And just before the case came to the tribunal, the barrister took us all to one side, all the witnesses, gave an hour-long briefing that was all about case law and the legal precedent he'd be leaning on. Really fascinating. But as a throwaway comment, at the end of that session, he said, what counsel is looking for in a great witness is good eye contact. Don't fidget. And please be aware that you're not allowed to take notes. Now, you won't notice this over Zoom, but if we were in person, you would spot in a second that eye contact is not my thing. I can freestyle it and wing it, but whilst I'm doing so, I'm also counting, because someone once told me that eye contact for over the count of 5 is creepy. Under the count of 3 is you're not paying attention. So I've got that going on when I'm trying to fake it. And I thought, I will mention my neurodivergence, and I will say, those are barriers for me. I'm autistic, I've got ADHD, eye contact's not my forte, look at how I'm waving my hands. And also it hugely helps me to keep notes, helps me maintain focus, especially in a legal forum when you're going to get a lengthy question. And I can keep on track. And thankfully, employment tribunals are the very hub of workplace adjustments. So they were very happy to accommodate. And the reason I highlight that as an example is because I walked into the tribunal. They didn't mind about my lack of eye contact. They didn't mind about my hands waving all over the place. They were very happy for me to bring in a pen and make notes. And as a result, I was a great quality witness, which is really important to me because I had my suit dry cleaned. I had driven there 2 hours early to arrive on time. I had read 4 Liber Arch files worth of evidence, and I had created a timeline in Excel that through SQL coding I could manipulate in various different data dimensions according to the key individuals involved in that timeline. So I knew this inside out. But if I hadn't had the opportunity to understand the social etiquette that sat around that situation, and some people who are neurotypical might go, well, duh, they're expecting good eye contact. They're expecting you not to fidget because that means something. I don't know that. Don't take that for granted. That's not the first thing that occurs to me. And so having an explanation can go a really long way. Someone tells me a little bit about the process, and I am then able to understand what my barriers might be and talk about how I can best overcome that. That's really powerful from an ownership perspective. Like we've said, I've seen it in the chat from Jamie, I think it was, adjustments cost nothing. So everything that I was asking for was free. It was no harm to anyone. And I only raise it when it's relevant. At work, I'm very proud to discuss it, and I'm very proud advocate. But I don't want to waste anyone's time, and that's often something that sits with lots of people who are looking for employment. Don't want to be a nuisance. And so I have heard employers say, well, why didn't you tell me? You worked here for years. Why haven't you brought it up? And that speaks volumes about sort of the onus being on the individual with a disability, condition or impairment to raise it in the first place. And that's a culture I'd love to challenge. It's to normalise a conversation around adjustments, make it less about disability or neurodivergence and more about how do we all work best. Because it's that simple.
Yeah.
And level the playing field a little bit. It wasn't all rosy in the garden. There was a little bit that was hilarious, actually. They got very giddy about the fact they had somebody with a disability on the squad. And they offered me a disabled parking space. Epic. Because parking in this particular location is a nightmare. And I was so tempted. But my moral compass dictated I couldn't. But yeah, even that conversation where someone misfired slightly enabled me to say, well, actually, what does help is for me to understand my sensory environment. So can I come in a day early and have a bit of a look round? Could I find out where the toilets are and what the lighting's like and what the echoey sound is like in the room that we're going to be in? They were very happy to accommodate. So even I wouldn't encourage anyone to ever be put off having a conversation about how you make your workplace more accommodating by worrying about saying the wrong thing, because saying something opens up a door for someone to be able to have a very powerful discussion that makes a massive difference. As you probably gathered, I could chat about this all day, but we're not allowed.
Good.
Yeah,
No,
lovely
you've
to meet the panel.
only got 25 minutes left. But that was super interesting, Sarah. Thank you very much.
Yeah, super. It was excellent, excellent. Just a few things there. I absolutely loved the notion about sort of adjustments, which is, turn that conversation around to how we all work best. So that was a wonderful way to phrase it. That's brilliant. Let's move to Jess. So Jess is from Angel charity. She's also autistic, and she discovered that quite recently. She was a teacher. So perhaps, Jess, you can explain your experiences and how you came to realise your own diagnosis and your work experiences. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Hi everyone. Yes, I'm Jess. I now work at Angel, which is an autistic-led organisation based in Reading, and we do peer support for autistic adults in and around the Reading area. We also offer neurodiversity training to organisations as well. I've been working there since January. And it's been quite a big change for me because for 10 years prior to that, I was a teacher. And I struggled and loved it at the same time for a decade. I really, really wanted to help the children. I was drawn towards the autistic children. And I ended up in a couple of different special needs provisions over the years because of that. And it was actually flagged up during my teaching career that I was good with the children that needed the extra support. So I always seemed to end up with the classes full of children who needed lots of support. Now, the problem with that is that I am one person. And as we all know, schools are, the classrooms are full, and there's not really enough to go around for everybody, and it can be quite challenging. And I didn't know that I was autistic at the time. I had no idea. I just thought I was a highly anxious person. And I didn't know anything else. I thought that I used to refer to myself as a lovable oddball because that's what people used to call me in primary school. So I just used to kind of skit around, and I liked being quirky. I liked the fact that I had that sort of edge difference to myself. But it did cause problems because sometimes people misread that difference as being problematic, and I found myself getting into trouble at work because I hadn't done something that I was supposed to do. I hadn't heard an instruction properly, or I'd been told something very literally and I had done it very literally, and that's not what was intended. So there's there was a lot of that going on. Also my moral, something that I identify with quite a lot is this strong moral compass. And that doesn't mean that I'm always right. It just, it doesn't mean that I'm always right, but it does mean that I notice things. So I notice when something's unfair. And I used to get really upset if I felt that the children were being treated unfairly. And I would get very passionate about this, and it didn't always go down very well. And now that I realise that I'm autistic, I realise where that's coming from, and I can see that my emotions were coming out and I didn't realise. So over the course of the 10 years, I eventually burnt out. And at this point, I then got an occupational health referral. During this time, the schools had tried many different reasonable adjustments for me. But the problem is that it was all temporary. And so everything that got put in for me, I would have it for a few weeks. There'd be a big song and dance about the fact that it had been put in for me, which was embarrassing. And then it would be taken away when I started to get better. And I didn't notice, and they didn't seem to notice, that the reason that I was getting better was because I needed those adjustments. And the moment you take that away from me, I'm going to fall. And I think that's a really important point about when you are autistic, when you have ADHD, it is lifelong. And so those reasonable adjustments may have to be there for the whole of your working career. So I realised in the end that I couldn't carry on the way I was, and it was but in 2020 that it was mentioned to me that I might be autistic. And at first, because of, I think it might have been Sarah that said about the way that autism and other neurodivergent conditions are put across in the media, to most people's knowledge, I just didn't think I fit. Because I just didn't understand, and actually I've got such a better understanding of it now. But even my training as a teacher, when I had autism training, I look back on the autism training now and I think that wasn't good. And I remember actually when I had the autism training as a teacher, and then I would meet the autistic children and I'd think, that's not the same. So I always sort of knew it wasn't quite right. Thankfully now there's a lot more autistic led training, and I think that's really important, because you're hearing from the people who are actually experiencing it, and that is so valuable, and that's part of what we do at Autism. And that's one of the reasons why I got a job at Autism, because I was a member there first and then I got given a job. And I've been there for 9 months and I haven't had one sick day, which to me is a miracle, because normally there's a 3-month period and then I'll have a sick day because I get burnt out. So yeah, it does make a difference when you're in an autistic environment, an autistic friendly environment, for sure. So.
Super. Thank you very much, Jess, and for being so honest about about your personal experiences there. And as you said, there is a long way still to go in terms of bringing everyone's awareness, and hopefully this is part of it, awareness around neurodiversity, and improving that. I was just looking at the numbers before the session, and I think Stuart mentioned that, out of 1,400 something, was it 111 of that order were neurodiverse? And this is the openly declared, openly stated numbers. I think overall it's something like 15 to 20%, something like that. So that's an enormous number. It's in the millions, isn't it, when we look at the population of the UK? that are neurodiverse.
Underestimation, really. I think nowadays more and more people are recognising traits in themselves, and I think maybe some of us are more neurodivergent than others, but I think certain quirks which probably do fit into a diagnosis somewhere or other. It just depends how impactful that is on your life. Anna's nodding enthusiastically.
Yeah. No, I'd like to open up to the audience now. And you know, if there's a question, I know Jamie, you put in some observations as well. Perhaps you would like to say something just in terms of your experiences. This is Jamie Gordon. If you'd like to say something around your experiences, or if you have a question for any of the panelists.
Yeah, actually, I've got a question for Becky, actually. Do you have a successful rate of getting people into employment through the training that you do?
Unfortunately, at the moment, we're still in startups, so no, I don't. I'll be very frank with you, because we're at the point where we're trying to get it set up. So no, we don't. What we do, the success that we do have is the fact that when we took our trainees into other breweries, they changed what they were doing. That's the biggest success. Yeah, no, I was really pleased with that.
That's cool.
Yeah, they changed
that's
some
amazing.
of their, they changed some of their accessibility. They changed their website. So we did make some changes, but I'm not satisfied at all yet. What we want to do is something more like, if you look up Ignition Brewery, they're near Lewisham, give them a look. They've been doing this for 8 years, and we're very much interested in how they did it. It's very frustrating. We're a bit early on, but our ideal is absolutely, the end goal is employment. I'm going to be dead frank about that. We're nowhere near that yet, but I'm determined. I am so determined, and the whole team are determined. But I don't want to lie to you. We don't yet, but we have had a small impact even in our startup phase. Does that answer your question?
It absolutely does. I think that you've got the goal and you've got the drive, and I think that's really good. I really like that. Well done. Yeah, I think you've done a very good job.
Honestly, the effort that went into your crowdfunder, it was absolutely enormous, and I could just see the passion that you were putting into it, and it worked.
It did. I was really tough. But doesn't that tell you also that there's that hunger? Because, you know, we're doing it from a very grassroots place. I mean, we're just a bunch of ordinary people in Reading. And the response was pretty big. And I think that's because people recognise that, you know, who doesn't have either themselves that are neurodivergent, or loved ones that are, or loved ones that have multiple disabilities. So we've also, we deal with a wider range of disabilities. Like the biggest, ideally, one of my little dreams is that our brewery will be fully wheelchair accessible, which as far as I know would be the first fully wheelchair accessible brewery in the world. But I'm working on being sure about that.
It's a bit challenging where it is, isn't it?
But there is some upsides of being small, in that the brewing vessels would still be reachable from a wheelchair. So there is some upside, but you can't move in it. But we can build from there. But I just, you know, there's so much we can do with this. I mean, I just want to say, whilst I've got the floor for a second, that how amazing, wasn't everyone so interesting? I wanted to come back to, with Sarah. Sarah was talking about how eye contact and keeping notes. Oh my goodness. So I am still fighting the fact that my daughter's EHCP, which is like, what was the old statement? Every year has said she has to make eye contact. She's autistic. She's nonsense. And every year I have to explain to them that this is not comfortable. This is not helpful. In fact, it's counterproductive. And I still get stared at like I'm not making sense. So I wanted to say, I hear
the irony of getting stared at in response to that is
I know,
lost
exactly.
I think I find, you know, sometimes it's really tough, but I find having a sense of humour about this really helps. Really does. An autistic mindset about things, you know, just And I suppose neurodivergence is just differently wired brains. And it brings a creativity of thought that we can embrace and can lend itself very well to challenging some weird societal perceptions. So who decided, and what were they on, that gazing into someone's watery ocular sacs equals trustworthiness? Where did it come from?
I completely relate to that. So
we can let people get away with some absolutely outlandish behaviour.
Yeah. Because they looked in your eyes.
Yeah, but as long as they looked you in the eyes,
Not too much though, not for too long.
Too long.
So I've got 2 hands up here. Should we just have Raj quickly because he hasn't said anything, and then we'll come back to you, Anna. Rajiv, do you want to say something quickly?
Yeah, a question for Becky again, or anyone else in the panel can respond. I mean, Becky, I do understand that employment can create a huge amount of support for the self-esteem issues. And we would rely on compassionate employers to be able to make suitable adjustments for people, those who have neurodiverse issues. That said, there would be small to medium enterprises who would like to be as competitive as possible and compete in the workplace scenario. So for some employers, it may not be that practicable to make adjustments unless it becomes legally binding for them to be able to make some adjustments. Could there be, so my question, that was the background. So my question is that, could there be something else where, instead of employment, I of course do understand that employment is hugely beneficial. It can make people financially independent. Yet, could there be some other possibilities which could be looked at, which can enhance self-esteem possibilities, those who have such obvious traits?
Okay, Raj, I might be a little bit tough in my answers here, and I hope you aren't offended. So first of all, there are legal requirements for reasonable adjustments for people with diagnoses. That's already in place, and businesses actually have to do that. I've been a small business owner myself, so that actually is already in place. Secondly, I'm afraid to say this has nothing to do with self-esteem. This is about having a job. People who have neurodivergence, learning disabilities, multiple disabilities, they are people, and people can have jobs. As a society, we place an awful lot of moral compass around the ability to have a job. In fact, if you don't have a job, you are frequently called a scrounger. And actually, this brings me to something very important, which is one of the difficulties, particularly, I think, moving away from maybe neurodivergence and moving on to learning disabilities. You cannot win. If you have a learning disability, your chances of getting employed are very low. However, you are told that if you claim benefits, you are a scrounger. So one of the things we see in what we do is people are desperately searching for jobs, but they cannot find them. So then in the end, when they can't even get work experience, let alone jobs, of course, over 18, parents are not allowed to care for them. This is one of the things, when you become over 18, your parents, unless you do very complicated legal things, you are a person in your own right, which is correct. You should be over 18. But as a result, a lot of people want to have jobs, but businesses won't even consider them because they think it's some kind of patronising, oh, I'll give you a little bit of work experience for some self-esteem. Now, these are people who need jobs just like anybody else. And one of the things that we at CMIC try to do is say, absolutely, you have a skill set, and there's absolutely no reason why that skill set cannot be utilised in a business setting that is productive and useful, just like anybody else. So I don't believe this is anything to do with self-esteem. I'm so sorry, and I hope I've not caused an offence, but this isn't about self-esteem. This is about people having jobs just like anybody else. So I'm not sure I've answered your question, but that is absolutely where I come from and where self-esteem comes from in what we are trying to do. Because one of the things that's been very interesting, even though we're not fully set up yet, we have worked with other businesses, and our trainees have come in with multiple disabilities. And what's actually happened is minds have changed, work processes have changed, and incredible products have been made that have been sold out there at standard or good profit. So there is absolutely no reason why this shouldn't be normalised. In fact, I would argue that it doesn't make sense that this hasn't been normalised. But I certainly want to take away this stigma where it's incredibly difficult to get a job, but you want a job. And you're in this complete catch-22. When you want a job, you can't get a job, then you're called a scrounger. So you want a job, you can't get a job, then you're called a scrounger. And then you rely on some kind of charitable, oh, well, I tell you what, why don't we give you a job for half the minimum wage? Isn't that nice of us? No. These are human beings, and there are definitely ways of doing this. And although we're small, that's what we're trying to model. And I hope we can convince other businesses that this absolutely does work.
Can I just say something quickly? That's a really good point. Thank you, and passionately delivered. I'm just conscious I'm not a very time-aware person. That's one of my challenges. Well, I can see we've got 6 minutes left. So I'm just wondering, Gavrit, are you okay if we go on a bit longer?
Well, I'm okay. I just want to check with the panelists if we can go on for a few more minutes. Yep.
In my case, people don't know, but actually my daughter is in high dependency unit at the moment. I can't stay much longer. I do need to go fairly soon. Is that okay?
Yeah, no, it's fine. Yes. I think it's unfair actually at this point, I think, to carry on.
I just think if we try and wrap up in 4 minutes,
I know this is a fascinating discussion, and we could probably talk for another hour, I'm sure.
I'm sure. Can I go back to Anna before we go off to anyone else? Because Anna's been very patient. Yes. And then we can go to Graham Hobbs.
Yeah.
I'll make it very quick, but I just wanted to say thank you for everyone, for all the panelists, for sharing. As someone, I have autism and ADHD, so especially what you were saying, Sarah, about working with eye contact, I completely agree. I'm not good at it. And I just want to say thank you for sharing, because I think it's so important we have people in these work environments, different jobs, that are representing what you were saying, Becky, about we are all human beings, and we equally all deserve an opportunity. And I just want to say thanks. And also I think it's absolutely amazing. I think was it Stuart that, I think it was you that has the company where you have mentoring scheme for people with neurodivergence conditions, and I just think that's amazing. And thank you for sharing all the information. I was really, really pleased to see it. Neurodivergence and disability positive employees and employers in action. So thank you.
They're fantastic examples, aren't they? Thank you for your positive contribution, Anna. Graham, what would you like to say?
We love positive stories, and thank you very much indeed for those positive stories we've heard tonight. I got a couple of bits myself. Stuart works with a lady called Lizzie, who might have been on the panel tonight. She's reached the national finals Toastmasters in the last 12 months, speaking on neurodiversity, and 7.5 minutes of pure joy that has been celebrated across the country now. She's a real live wire, always speaks very, very well and differently as well. So she's a real shining light. Our president this year is Garfield Rees, celebrates the fact that he suffers from dyslexia, and always has done, has become a very successful project manager, and is a brilliant leader as well. And then just the other little bit of good news, some of the things I do is Wokingham United Charities. We sponsor a variety of different things. One of the things we sponsored was a Kibble Cafe in Wokingham, which I think had about £5,000 from charity, and they were awarded 5 stars and more for the cafe. It was run by an autistic team. The coffee, cake, etc. there is as good as anywhere in Wokingham. So lovely success stories. I'm particularly interested in the positive difference. Maybe if at some point we can get some of the chap from Elusive to come and talk about his experience, because he's a success. There's plenty of brewers we see from time to time. So they keep sharing your stories and utilise people like Garfield and Lizzie from Anne's Digital to spread the word, because they do it so well for you and us.
Brilliant. Well, that's fantastic. Thank you, Graham, for those leads as well. We'll be in touch. Huge thank you to everyone who joined us today, particularly the panelists. I know they lead busy lives, but this is a really important topic. So thank you very much. And also thank you to everyone who did take out time to join us and share their thoughts. I hope this has helped a little bit in terms of raising the level of awareness and also sharing just experiences between people. I really love the point that Sarah made about developing the community inside organizations of like-minded individuals, and some wonderful thoughts really throughout the session. So I'm just going to share a couple of slides with you. So we couldn't do what we do without support from our partners. So just a quick shout out to all our partners and supporters in and across Reading and beyond. And do stay in touch with Ethical Reading as you go forward. We've got the website, so do go there, and we have regular events. So we've got an event coming up in November around ethics and AI. So if you can join us for that, that would be awesome. And we've got a sustainability program and another program around ethics in education. We have a number of channels on social media and YouTube. So find out a little bit more, get in touch. You can volunteer, and that would be fantastic as well. So thank you very much for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you next time. All the best.